The Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be splitting my time with the member from London, Fanshawe. So, Mr. Speaker, today I'm here to speak on the NDP's very important motion that's asking this House to have the Prime Minister of Canada to apologize for a very, very important broken promise on electoral reform. And, I have to say that when I was campaigning, I knocked on a lot of doors, and what I was really saddened by was the level of cynicism, where people were telling me at the door, I don't think I'm going to vote. It doesn't feel like my vote means anything. I don't like the system. It doesn't work. I don't feel like I'm connected. And often that conversation would lead into a very important conversation about electoral reform and what kind of systems are happening in other parts of the world and how they engage the members of their communities in a new and more meaningful way. So I just want to say I am so grateful and want to thank the many, many members of my riding who have talked to me about this really important foundational issue. Whether it was one of the 4 town halls, because in a riding as large as mine, there is no such thing as doing one town hall, the survey that was sent to every household in the riding, or through personal conversations, I heard loud and clear this was a conversation my constituents wanted to be a part of. And I think that's really important, because the government seems to keep thinking this is about consensus. And I came and I did town halls, and a lot of people didn't know a lot about different systems, and there was a lot of questions. But at the end of the day, they weren't always sure of what system they wanted, but they did know they wanted to have this conversation, and they wanted their voices to be heard, and they wanted to learn more. So thousands of my constituents participated, Mr. Speaker. In fact, so far, this is the issue that people engaged in the most profoundly. My offices were amazed by the survey responses we got and kept receiving for months. The issue matters to the people of North Island Powell River. That means it matters to me, as does following through with commitments. Since the announcement was made by the Minister that meaningful electoral reform was no longer part of moving forward, my staff have been overwhelmed with emails and phone calls. Ironically, the announcement from the Minister was made, and less than a week later, my constituents opened their mailboxes to see my mail out that told them that the report that we had created on their feedback on electoral reform was on our website. I have to tell you, in a matter of hours, we received well over 100 emails because they received it in their mailbox, and they were very upset that they didn't get what they wanted from this government. What we are talking about today is important. It is about listening to the people of this country. It's about engaging them in a meaningful conversation about what our democracy means. This government asked us to do their work and hold town halls and surveys, and Mr. Speaker, we did it. We all got into our communities, we did surveys, we did town halls, and we opened up this discussion because we believed and we had faith that this would be a real discussion about change. Today I'm going to share some of the results from the thousands of constituents of North Island Powell River. I asked constituents several questions. The scale was as follows: 1 strongly agree, up to 5, which is strong, or 1 was strongly disagree, up to 5 where they strongly agreed. The first question was, a party seat in Parliament should reflect the percentage of votes they receive. The response was overwhelming. 75% strongly agreed, 9% agreed. That means over 84% wanted to see a system where every vote meant something, where every vote counted. The second question was, working collaboratively and having cross-party support is vital. 87% agreed. Third question was, having a local representative is important to me. This question received the highest support at over 88% agreeing or strongly agreeing. The claim that there is no consensus around electoral reform is false. The numbers I compiled in my riding is proof. The current e-petition urging the Liberal government to follow through on its campaign commitment surpassed over 92,000 signatures, making it the most signed petition on the Parliament of Canada's website. That is proof. I was never under the illusion that this would be easy or that the process would be wrapped up quickly, Mr. Speaker, but I am a strong believer in process. We may not have collectively picked the next electoral system, but as one lady said to me in a written statement, I'm a bit old, and understanding all the different systems you taught us about took a lot of work. I don't have a full answer yet, but I want to continue this discussion. It is such an important one. I believe we have to have the broad consensus necessary, at least, I believe we already have it. We have the broad consensus necessary, at least to continue this process. Canadians want a more proportional system, and we know that. During the work of the committee, nearly 90% of the experts and 80% of the members of the public that testified called on the government to adopt a proportional electoral system. By abruptly terminating this process and blaming the voters for it is revolting. The management of this file from the start shows us that the consistent behaviour that forecast the Liberal Party was determined to keep the current system because it benefits them. This behaviour could be seen by the length of time it took for the government to start the committee, by the outrageous comments made by the former minister aimed at undermining the committee's work, where her own people were hurt, or on the online survey, mydemocracy.ca, which was immediately ridiculed from all sides. Canadians criticized the biased and vague questions and felt very manipulated. This is a lack of courage for moving forward and seems to be a broken promise from the very start. Canadians are feeling betrayed and are extremely disappointed. New Democrats are determined to have the Liberals apologize to Canadians. Mr. Speaker, during the town halls, I heard things like, I just want my vote to count. I want to feel I can vote the way my conscience tells me, and strategic voting is something we no longer have to consider. The Prime Minister's misleading promise of electoral reform breeds cynicism in our politics. And Mr. Speaker, that is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when we see that young people, that people of all ages are not participating in our democracy the way that we want to see them do that. I believe this conversation would have opened some of those doors and provided a deep and meaningful opportunity for people to feel like they were part of creating the system of Canadians. How can the Prime Minister and Liberal MPs justify engaging Canadians, engaging them fundamentally, pretending that they are listening, only to let them know that their voice no longer matters? The motion we are debating is about honesty and commitment to what we believe in. The Liberals have said they will always consult with Canadians on many fronts and on many topics. Canadians have a right to ask whether these are just delaying tactics for more broken promise. A little more action is needed and a little less conversation, as one great singer once said. Mr. Speaker, the consultations helped me to further grasp people's concerns about representation and decision-making in this place. I sincerely enjoyed the town halls, and the discussions became quite passionate. Constituents were taking a real interest about what different systems mean and what they wanted to see in their democracy. A man said to me, I am tired of watching everyone yell at each other in Parliament. We need a system that makes parliamentarians work together. The best decisions have mostly come from minority governments, where parliamentarians had to work together. I want a system that says, you have to work together in this place and not just call another election when the going gets tough. So I must plead to the government. My constituents are asking me to work on electoral reform with you. With 39% of the votes, how can Liberals unilaterally close this process when you know proportionality is at the heart of this discussion? Mr. Speaker, I believe that this motion is fair. The people in my riding were interested in a real discussion. There was a lot of curiosity and a lot of openness. They worked hard to give their opinion to me and to the government. In good faith, they participated in this important discussion. Mr. Speaker, the people of Canada were not asked if this discussion was over. They were told. I think it is only fair that the many people who participated, who came to events across Canada, filled out multiple surveys and started to seriously consider what other systems look like, who really contemplated what a new system of democracy would mean in Canada. To those people, this government needs to apologize. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? Alors, la députée de...
The honourable member for Pierre-Fond-Dollard.
I too undertook to do consultations, and what I found is that there was a core people that were deeply interested in learning about electoral reform. There was about as many people that felt that we were misplacing our energy, saying, why aren't you focusing on the economy, on job creation, the environment, or healthcare? So I got different feedback in that sense. And the majority of people, unfortunately, that I tried to engage said they weren't that knowledgeable about it, nor, quite frankly, that interested. However, I did feel that the process was valuable because I myself learned a lot about different procedures, different ways of voting, and the people that did engage did find that. However, I did find that there was no consensus. A lot of people said they were learning, and I'm curious because the member said that there was a clear consensus from her consultation. It differs from what I found, and I'd just like to understand a bit more about that.
Member for North Island, Powell River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to also take this opportunity to thank Jamie Deeth and Guy Palkington, who came to the town halls and educated people. They were both very well versed in different systems. So it was amazing to see people from the riding come forward. It's absolutely the case that there are some people who know a lot and there's some people who know very little. But this is what I heard again and again. Regardless of what they came to the town halls to talk about, they wanted to be part of the conversation. They wanted to have a meaningful discussion, and they were really interested. We talked about different systems. We talked about what the committee was talking about, and people got really engaged. So I think it is very unfair to say that there wasn't a consensus. You know what? There may have not have been a consensus on a particular type, but there was a lot of curiosity and a lot of discussion, and people wanted to move forward. And yes, they wanted to move forward on those important things like making sure they have a good paying job, making sure that they had the home care that they needed for the many seniors that I serve. And I was very unhappy to have to share with them the broken promises from this government on those issues as well.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the member for her speech. And I was listening carefully to it and to also to the previous intervention. And one wonders then why such a strident promise was made by this government. This was what I've been thinking about during this debate. I would tend to agree with the previous speaker that indeed there may not have been the appetite for change. That's the interaction my own riding has found, but that's the real point here is a promise was made. A promise was made and repeated, I don't know how many times in this House. And that's not the only promise that this government made. This government made many promises during its campaign, including that of running an absolute maximum $10 billion deficit and balancing the budget before 2019. That promise is completely blown out the window. I'd be delighted to have this member comment on the credibility of a government that just seems able to promise anything and is its seeming indifference to the promises made during the campaign.
Well, member for North Island, Powell River.
I thank my honourable colleague for this very important question. And I think it is at the very core of what this motion is about today. It's about the fact that this government made a promise repeatedly. The actions didn't follow through with the promise at all from day one. We saw the committee waiting and waiting to be set. We saw sort of this vague and changing commentary. But this Prime Minister stood up repeatedly as he was campaigning outside of this House and in this House, making a very profound promise to all Canadians. And it's a fundamental, foundational promise, because this is about the very way that we engage with people in how we vote. So it's something that needed to be done in a more appropriate way. This committee that worked so hard, they worked hard all summer long. They provided a huge report for parliamentarians and for Canadians. To see that report come out and then some weird survey that doesn't deal with the core issues of what we were asking Canadians is devastating. And I have to say that I have just recently finished 11 town halls in my riding on seniors issues, because the people in my riding are suffering profoundly family, especially the seniors. And what I heard again and again was they were devastated by the fact that the promise, another promise that was made at the election, to put $3 billion into home care to make sure that people could get the support that they needed, was not there. So I'm really concerned about the cynicism in this country because the promises are not being kept.